Welcome to the Zero Input Agriculture Podcast. Today I have a really interesting guest. It's someone who's been following my work for quite some time now and regularly posts really interesting questions to me, and we've had a few discussions back and forth. So we thought let's take it further and have a podcast chat together. So Cimbri is a younger person living in the US with a young family, but they don't have access to their own land. So I think a lot of my other listeners and readers are in a similar position. They want to pursue the kind of things that I've been lucky enough to do at this stage in my life, and they're kind of paying attention to my experiences to give them some kind of a roadmap for the future. So, Cimbri, do you want to tell us a bit more about you, introduce yourself, and then we'll start working our way through the interesting list of talking points that you've sent me that I'm keen to get into.
Yeah, Shane, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be on here. Like you said, I've been following you for a while. It's really rare, I think, that you find people that are kind of like at this intersection of understanding like how society, the energy economics and how everything is built. Like the simple foundation differences between like wheat and corn and how that could affect how two and totally different societies developed, right? To
Mm.
find people like you who are just like really getting at the heart of the way the world works, the way the world could work differently in the future, like that to me is like really cutting edge stuff, you know? I don't feel like it's really hard to think of anything else that can have such a big impact in the moments that we live in now, but almost anybody has access to, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, I really appreciate being able to talk to you in person.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Oh, likewise, likewise. So, tell us a bit more about like how you see who you are and where you are in the world and the challenges and hopes and aspirations, just
Hmm.
to kind of
Hmm.
position you in the
Right.
listener's mind.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. Okay, so I live in the eastern US, in the South. I am from the state of Tennessee, joined the military, traveled all around the country, been kind of around the world a little bit, met my wife in the military, and we settled down. We've had a few children before we were able to, in hindsight, I was a little arrogant, was like, oh, it'll be easy to get land, right? And that was right before COVID. So that kind of, I kind of was a little overconfident on that one, right? So right now, the primary challenge is that my wife and I are in an interracial relationship, and America has kind of a long history of, you know, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar, right? Kind of a
Hmm.
sordid colonial history. And so it just has made that kind of challenging because a lot of the places I would have wanted to live in, like my, where my family's from in the Appalachian Mountains, we tried moving back there and we got kind of a frosty reception. So
Mm.
it wasn't as hospitable as I remember it being. So we've kind of had to bounce around and adapt and make different plans. And that's, again, along with the whole market thing, that's made it kind of rough trying to find a new spot for us. I think I've got it honed in now, but it's taken quite a number of years. I mean, it was like I remember in 2019 thinking like I can't even imagine not having land by 2025, like what the world would look like, and here I
Hmm.
am. So,
Hmm.
you know, but I'm making it.
And it's a big decision too that until you've actually like bought land and tried to work it, there's a lot of
Hmm.
considerations that just aren't tangible and aren't
Right.
spoken about and are difficult to like get a reliable advice on. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
if someone in the
yep.
local area was asking me like which property I should buy, I would still only be somewhat more than guessing. There would be things that
Mhm.
I wouldn't be able to tell just by, even visiting a property
Yeah.
or a
Yeah. And
community.
don't remind me, that's the problem, right? Because I'm more than aware that I mean, you say yourself it takes like 10 something years, or I believe you said 20,
Yeah,
to
10
really
or
develop
20.
local, yeah, staple
Yeah.
crops. And so I'm over here like, okay, maybe I'll have five, before things are really crazy. So yeah, it's certainly not ideal, right? But we make the most of what we have.
Mm. And there's a lot of things that people can do to prepare, like before you have land. Like the land is kind of
Mhm.
like part of the situation, but it's not all of it. So if you don't have
Mhm.
land and you won't have it for the immediate future, there's like lots of other things that you can do that are beneficial in like the state of the world. And I think that was some of the things we wanted to talk about today.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. I guess I'm kind of lucky because I didn't necessarily, I've got a good list here of stuff. I didn't necessarily set out thinking, I'm going to practice being a medieval peasant before I need to know it, right? I actually I read a lot about anthropology and other kinds of societies. I read about hunter-gatherers. And so I just had an interest in it's called human rewilding, is kind of the
Hmm.
community that's around this kind of stuff. And I just have developed some of these things just kind of because, the general consensus would basically be that the conditions of modern civilization are totally different from how we've evolved as a species, right? So
Hmm.
if you've got 300,000 years where you're outside every day, you're obviously there's no such thing as microplastics, and you're getting exercise, you're spending time in nature compared to now you're in a cubicle or now you're in a little box driving to work. It's just a totally different environment for that animal, right?
Mm.
So the human rewilding community does a lot of stuff like that where you're trying to you're in captivity still, right? But it's the difference between a zoo animal who's pacing around, challenging himself, trying to work out, and keep his mind active versus one that just is laying there, getting fed through the chute and not really doing a whole lot, right?
And
So yeah.
yeah, there's a lot you could like if you're going to end up with land, particularly like most people would end up with property to farm in like their 30s or their 40s, you need to
Mhm.
maintain the right kind of physical health to have a
Right.
chance of being able to actually use the land when you get it.
Right, exactly. And actually, that was the first thing I was going to say. It's kind of I don't know, I feel like people don't consider it to be very natural, I guess. You'll see a lot of people that are like, oh, I want more functional fitness, but honestly, just basic weightlifting, right,
Mm,
is really overall gets you quite developed physically to do a variety of different things, right?
mm,
So as an example that I have, I had to volunteer, got a speeding ticket, and I had to volunteer a certain amount of hours at my city park, right? And they put me to work. I mean, I probably could have slacked off, but I was like, I'm here. I'm going to do a good job. So I'm hauling I have wheelbarrow loads of mulch up and down a hill. I'm shoveling them out. I'm doing all this crazy, basically thrust into manual labor because that's not my normal job, right?
hmm.
And I more or less was able to successfully keep up for 3, 4 days straight, doing quite a number of hours where I was even, they actually pulled me and had me working with the real employees who do it for a living because primarily, I lift weights and I run for cardio. And so I was more or less ready, my body was ready and my soul, right?
Mm, mm.
Or the spirit, right? So I
What?
was going to say specifically the deadlift exercise.
Hmm.
I've noticed if you're shoveling something or if you're hoeing something or if you're swinging an axe, which I had to do I didn't do that during the volunteering, but I've done that before.
Mm.
That's the exact same motion as a deadlift. Like you use all those same motions, right? All the same
If
muscles,
you're
I should say.
using a good technique.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the key is that weightlifting is going to make you, at least if you're doing it right, focus on that good technique, have that mind muscle connection, how to know what you're doing without hurting yourself versus this might sound crazy, but here's another example from human rewilding. We don't even know how to pick stuff up. I mean,
Mm,
that is how bad our culture is. If you look at people who bend over at the waist versus people who move their hips, like in Africa, for example, or in Asia or whatever, women who are they're bending over, doing, they call it stoop work, pulling crops and stuff out of the ground all day.
mm,
They bend at the hips, right? It's just a very basic thing for them. They're kind of doing like a deadlift almost, right?
mm.
But in maybe a more comfortable posture. And over here, people throw their back out picking a pin off the ground because they've just done it wrong their whole life, and we've never had a good example, right? So, you know, that's just the one that I think is very practical. But honestly, all of them are pretty useful.
What do you
Um,
think about there's a skill, I don't know if it has a name, but it's the awareness about bodily limits. Like
mhm,
as you're doing something to be constantly monitoring, it's like, am I pushing myself into injury or wear territory? And like, what is can I change the way I'm doing this? And even not just that there's one perfect technique, but you can vary how you're doing
mhm,
something for a prolonged period of time. There might be three or four ways you can
Hmm.
do
Hmm.
the job, or you can alternate different jobs that use your body in different ways, or you
Right.
can just
Yeah.
reach a point where you're like, no, I think I need to stop today if I want to be able to continue doing this tomorrow.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are really good points. I would say all of that is kind of par for the course once
Mm,
you've been doing it for a while, because, not only do you have that body awareness, but like you said, you're continually trying to push to just up to your limit, but not any further, right? Or
mm,
else you're going to get an injury or you're going to go too hard and you can't do it again. So you become very attuned, probably not in the exact same way, but you're the skill base is still there for being like, how much can I push myself? How much is too much, right? Am I going to be able to come back in 2 days and do this again?
yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that's
Do
all
you
very
wonder
true
how
about
peasant cultures used to do this? Like, I suspect that adults who are experienced in doing, like days of reaping grain or something when the season
it.
was
Mhm.
on, would have a culture of watching children learning how to do that and know when
Right.
to tell them to stop or to do it differently, and
Hmm.
they probably believe them. Because like
I
if
can only
if people get
say,
injured, like that could be a life or death situation. It can spiral
mhm.
into, not having enough food or not being able to work effectively for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that is interesting. I can't specifically say for peasants, right? Because that, like you said, it's probably kind of they're kind of living on the edge of failure all the time in terms of like a cultural like, they're really pushing to the limits of their capacity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I can say in my own experience and from what I've read about some other cultures that are more, maybe they have a little more wiggle room between survival and and failure, um, is that kids will naturally kind of observe the adults and follow the same movements, and they'll practice it on their own, right? So
Yeah.
if kids are watching you pick stuff up in a healthy way, they'll start doing that. And if they're watching you kind of like hunch over and bend at the waist and stoop, they're going to start doing that instead, because they're going to think that they do it wrong.
Mm.
Same with like squatting, which is like a natural human resting position. Kids just do that automatically, like
Yeah.
almost right before they can walk even.
Yeah.
And but if they see adults who can't do that anymore, or they do it on the balls of their feet, or they just sit all the time, they'll stop doing it
Yeah.
before they even really can articulate, because they're just observing the world around them, right? And I was also going to mention, what was I going to say? Oh, it seems to me like kids are really good at pushing themselves to their limits and then failing and then getting back into it and doing that over and over and over again. But they're pushing themselves usually to their like cardiovascular limit, or like they're
Hmm.
running around till they get tired. And I think it's because they just have a very playful approach to it, right?
Yeah.
And again, I
Yeah.
can't say how this would work with like medieval peasants, but I know, for example, with like with the Native Americans, I believe, I can't say a specific group, I just remember reading about this. I think the Powhatans, maybe. Their jobs for like the older than toddlers, but not quite like old enough to be really useful kids, is they had this little shade kind of little hut kind of thing they made for them by the cornfields, and then they would run and chase the crows off
Yeah.
with a stick when they would come to eat the grain. And so it's like they had a useful job, but it also was fun for a kid. They kind of worked with both, with the
Yeah.
nature of a kid, but
Yeah.
also being useful, right? But they would have been observing people. They would have been thinking, I'm going to be doing something else, as I get older, especially spending time with your mom. Here's something that just helps with kids in general, right? Is if you wear your children, like baby wrapping,
Hmm.
something we don't do in the US at all, but in other countries, super common. Those kids are watching you all the time. Like their little minds are just soaking in, like, oh, this is how you
Hmm.
cook food.
Mm.
Oh, this is how you run an errand. This is how you pick stuff up, whatever the case. And so you can have a kid and be working, and then it's a more smooth transition, I think,
Mm.
between compared to like, they're just inside all day, and then one day you're like, okay, time to work the fields.
So is human rewilding also, it has to be interested in like diet and health and
Hmm.
uh, uh, training that awareness of like uh, fine-tuning our instincts, our lost instincts for
Hmm.
eating well.
Hmm. So I have the world's worst superpower, if you want to hear about it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I've come to find out, I just found this out recently from talking to my grandparents, that we have like this blood curse. We have this like family history of like stomach issues. I thought it was just me. And as it turns out, like everybody all up the line, they were telling me about my great granddad. He'd have to get off his tractor, plow in the fields, and go like roll around under a tree, patting his stomach till he could go back to running the tractor. Right? It's just like, wow, that's crazy.
Totally cool and normal.
Yeah, right. So, and he had like ulcers or whatever they called it back then.
Mm,
My granddad had colon cancer. Anyway, the point is, we can't eat like any normal food.
hmm.
So I eat mostly like a paleo diet, and it's pretty much all I can eat. But it has really fine-tuned me to what all the processed or even just um, processed, but in the sense of being prepared to be eaten properly, like how they used to do traditionally. Like let's
Mm,
say beans, soaking them and sprouting them, things
yeah,
like that. I can pretty much detect immediately if I've eaten something that has some kind of industrial food in it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Sucks not being able to eat normal food, but it's really attuned me to like the modern diet and all the stuff they put in it that's not really good for you. I kind of think about it like, you know, like an alcoholic can, he can drive to work on a dose that would you and I would have blacked out, right?
yeah,
So yeah, I can't eat like soy sauce, but or canola oil or whatever the case may be. But I'm not going to have to worry about like in 40, 50 years from now having some kind of like inflammation or some kind of systemic issue because I ate that my whole life, right?
yeah, yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
Well, I totally agree that if you have a severe food allergy that's strong enough that you realize what it is and then you fix your diet, you're in
Hmm.
some ways better off than a person who is just kind of mildly ill their entire life and it never quite gets to the threshold of them reacting to it, of doing something
Right,
to
right.
fix it.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's a good metaphor. I'll hold on to that for later. But yeah, I think that's kind of something with our excuse me. I think that's something that is going to be really important if you're like potentially like founding a future culture, essentially. Like you're creating this assistance base for the next generation of people. If you just got together like whatever normal food you thought you're supposed to be eating, versus if you were like actually able to look into the different nutrients and anti-nutrients and things that build up in the body, you can basically select like, I guess the most seemingly ideal stuff, right?
Mm.
Like I think there's some like island and there's like a kind of cancer that only they get because in the entire world. And it's because they rely heavily on like tubers from not palms. What's the word I'm looking for
Oh,
here?
psychic.
Ferns?
I,
Yeah.
oh no, yeah, or fern. Yeah, yeah, I know the fern people too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it builds up in like their eyes and they get like this weird eyeball cancer. I think this is from memory.
Mm.
And so, it would have been nice to if they relied on something else 10,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, it adds well, it's an issue that you can start figuring out before you move to. Well, I've heard of people who like train to be pastry chefs and then find out that they have like severe celiac disease.
Wow.
It's like you could do an equivalent thing. Like you could move to the prime land for growing wheat and then
Yeah.
figure out that it's killing you and will
Yeah.
likely
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
problems for your children. Um,
Interesting. Yeah, exactly.
if you're stuck in suburbia for your 20s, that's the opportunity to sort those things out, to figure out
Right.
who you are as an organism. And if and when you get land in your 30s or beyond, which is, the best case scenario in the current world for most people in the West, you'll be in a better
Right.
position to get it right the first time.
Yeah, and that's basically how I look at it, like compared to my granddad. I mean, he's coming up in, or great granddad, he's coming up in like the Great Depression. Like he has no options, right? They're eating beans probably like
Yep.
every day, like beans and cornbread. So that poor guy, he just had to make it as best he could, I suppose. But I have, all these and Starbucks, and I can go literally get food from all over the world and sample it and be like, what helps, what hurts, whatever, and form like a new uh, like you said, like a suite of things that I know I can eat and that are good for you.
Yeah.
Or just another example, I mean, I think this came up for some reason. I'm reminded of the native group that you'd read about their agriculture.
Oh, the Hidatsa.
Right. I think it was like that, but it was like, I don't know why I'm thinking about them because it was like a group in Africa, but basically they had um, kind of like this malnourishment problem because there was, or what, they weren't malnourished. It was like essentially like basically like a 3 or 4 week period where the crops from one season had been finished and they'd eaten everything, but then they weren't starting to grow or they weren't fruiting the next season's crops. And some other different group came and introduced a crop that like fit perfectly in there that filled that window, right?
Mm.
And so you realize like, oh wow, even adaptive cultural process of these people finding and domesticating crops and trading with people wasn't perfect. Like it had this big gap,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you and I can have a spreadsheet and fill that gap before we ever get started, at least
Yeah.
in theory anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I was going to say, kind of along with diet, is teeth, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously, we all know our ancestors, like the last 100 or 200 years, their like teeth right out of their head. I mean, it's disturbing. Like they would have like three teeth left, and then it was like, if you were rich, you had slave teeth in your mouth, which is so weird. And if you were poor, you had wooden teeth, right?
Really
So
interesting tidbit here in Australia. Our colonial nutrition was so bad that when women
wow,
got pregnant, it was normal for all of their teeth to fall out as the
yeah,
baby sucked the calcium out of the poor woman's
yeah.
skeleton.
Oh my
Like it was
gosh.
just like, oh, God, that's normal. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Would you like us to
yeah.
pull some of
That
them out?
right, exactly. Or do you want to eat it for the calcium? Yeah, it's to me it's a sign of a very like biologically poorly adapted culture that we've created this. We have all this technology to supplement our poor biology, our poor nutrition, right?
Mm,
But that's like just this, it's like a literal crutch, right? It's like if we didn't have legs. So we're just like, that's okay, you're born and we'll size you for your wooden peg legs. It's like instead of asking what went wrong here, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So I read this article from this dental anthropologist, and he's talking about how essentially our ancestors have like perfect teeth. They have almost no cavities, if any, and they never miss teeth. They don't have like chipped teeth, whatever. And it's entirely basically due to diet. Like the very basic peasant diet is like a lot of carbs, which just turn to sugar in your mouth. It's like almost more than 50% carbohydrates, which is usually less than 30% for our ancestors, for hunter gatherers, I should say.
Yeah.
And um, where was I
And
going
and a
with that?
lack of physical activity of the jaw chewing so that the jaw
Thank you.
doesn't
Yeah.
develop fully and the
hmm
teeth end up crowded and that
You
affects the
got to get wisdom
breathing
teeth,
through the nose.
right? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I was trying to remember those points. Yeah. It's like basically your whole face and not just your teeth, but your jaw and your nose and everything, like you said, is affected by your diet. Like having these soft, easily, like basically mush foods like we have,
Yeah,
or having really crunchy food. We don't have like actual chewy, like beef jerky kind of or vegetables like crunchy chewy food that really shape your mouth like that.
yeah,
And that's an example where you could have some sort of agricultural diet, and I bet you could form it around having good jaw health or having good teeth health with just with cultural practices alone, and then you wouldn't have all those issues, right? And to me,
yeah,
I don't know, not having my teeth rot out seems ideal. So like I'll give you an example. With cheese, there's this like Nepalese cheese that's like they dry it over a fire and they smoke it. It's like really hard and really dry, right? It's almost you have to like wet it and turn it into like a putty before you can eat it.
yeah,
Well, I bet you, even if you didn't have meat, like you weren't a meat heavy society, um, you could probably just have a practice of like chewing on that, pulling on that with your mouth, and your teeth would form in properly, you
yeah.
know? Um, or just anyway, I was going to say with that article, he basically said the modern mouth is like in a continually diseased state. And so that kind of inspired me to take a look at like, um, he said basically the only reason we don't have the same issue is because we're constantly like nuking all the bacteria in our mouth with mouthwash and toothpaste and all that, right?
Yeah.
So a big experiment I did on myself was to like rewild my own dental care, which is kind of, it's pretty out there, right? Kind of risky. You only got the
Mm,
one set.
mm,
But I'm essentially at the point now where I only have to use water when I mechanically brush my teeth. And they have tooth cleaning twigs, like where they have pretty weak but natural antibiotics in different species of plants.
hmm.
But the reason I did it was basically just a time like, okay, so if I have carbs, let's say, one meal and then one day, and then I don't have it the next day, when do I get to the point where the microbiome of my mouth will balance out and it won't just be overloaded? Because you can feel like that fuzzy
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
feeling of the plaque and all that forming. So I can get to the point now where if I have carbs or something, that won't happen to me because I believe anyway, obviously I have no way of knowing, that my mouth microbiome has proliferated better compared to like nuking it, killing all the good stuff and the bad stuff, right?
So do you have I'm really interested in this. What do you think is the key Is there a series of key conditions you need to change? Is it spacing out those
Mhm.
carbohydrate meals that the microbes don't have a chance to build up,
Yeah.
or what's the key?
So yeah, I've read about this a lot. So um, if you have carbs all day with every meal, your mouth never gets a break,
Yeah,
right? So I, for example, this is another cultural thing that maybe somebody could do. If you loaded up on carbs one meal, like you had the same amount you would have had over 2 or 3 meals, and then you
yeah,
don't have it the next 2 meals, you give
yeah,
your mouth that break, right?
yeah.
Another thing is if you just rinse your teeth right away, you get them all off of your teeth,
Hmm.
right? So it's a lot better. And then here's one that I thought was really interesting. I don't know if it holds true. I don't know if there's a equivalent here for like a purely like Paleolithic food, but cheese, like aged cheese. If you
Hmm.
just take one bite of that after you had like really acidic, really, you could have a mouthful of pure sugar, right? And then if you eat some cheese right after, it cuts the window of the acidity from the bacteria converting that sugar into acid to break down your enamel from 30 minutes down to 5,
Yeah.
just from having a bite of cheese because it's so basic, it cancels it out, right?
Interesting.
So you can kind of see where you could have the same diet as like a medieval peasant, but you could shift around the elements and you could have a totally different outcome.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me,
Which
I've
I
always
don't know,
thought
to me is
about this
interesting.
with hunter-gatherers, like gathering tubers and then roasting them. It's quite a complex and slow process, and they probably only had those roasted tubers to eat once a day. That
Hmm.
it wasn't something that was continually available, like straight out of the
Maybe.
fridge.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly right. Yeah, because we can just kind of graze and we always have access to stuff. Yeah, if you had a society that like, you had maybe let's say 2 big meals a day, you rinsed your mouth after, you mechanically, if you cleaned it, um, and then maybe you didn't have carbs every meal,
Mm,
even without modern dental care, you probably would have an intact mouth full of teeth, right?
yeah,
Again, to me, that's interesting. You've also pointed out something that I thought was super fascinating, which is that, some people naturally, they can eat whatever they want. My wife's one of these people. Hell,
mm,
she might have rewilded my own oral microbiome without
yeah,
me thinking
yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah,
She can eat whatever she wants and her teeth are perfect. And she probably has a microbiome that doesn't allow S mutants to proliferate.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if we had a mind for it, we could just have figured that out already. Like, hey, here's the perfect, probiotic for your teeth, but not the weird ones they have made. That's just these wild natural bacteria that some people carry. And they could have just, I think you said the example like, you said it as a joke, but you were like, politicians usually have perfect teeth and they love to kiss babies. So this would be something useful for them to do.
a more functional model, like most babies accumulate their mouth microbiome from like kissing, and
Hmm.
traditionally mothers used to chew up baby food and spit it into their baby's
That's
mouth.
right.
That's probably when it happened. But in a
Hmm.
community that is trying to improve its its mouth microbial health, you could have special people who are like immune to getting cavities, even though they eat like a
Yeah.
normal starchy diet, and it's their
Hmm.
job to go around and kiss the babies at a particular stage in their development so that they get the
Right.
best possible start in life.
Yeah, exactly. That's another good example of our culture. Like we found a mechanical solution or a technological solution. Like let's just nuke our mouth all the time
Yeah,
and we can have as much as we want. Instead of being like, hey, look at these people, let's say 10% are just immune to it no matter what. Why don't we figure out why that is and we can spread that around? I
yeah,
mean, cynically, I guess I'd say that doesn't make anybody money, but for whatever the reason, yeah, we've totally missed that biological solution.
yeah. Excuse me, cough. Um,
You got to
uh,
stop me if I ramble on anything I
no,
say.
no, no.
So
This is all really
I don't know
fascinating
if the
stuff.
listeners care about teeth.
What else? What about shoes? Because I've had an issue with this. The first 5 years on the farm, I clodded around in big, heavy boots until my
Hmm.
feet were pinching every time I walked. I thought I was
Hmm.
not going to, and I just had to go almost barefoot. I'm
Hmm.
at worst in just a loose set of rubber thongs to stop me stepping on spiky things. But
Right.
what's been your experience with foot health?
Yeah, so that's another good example. I mean, honestly, pretty much anything you can look at in our society, and again, this is going to sound cynical, but it's making somebody money to sell you this technological thing you don't really need, right?
Mm,
So feet are a perfect example. Zola Budd used to set, um, like, she medaled. I think she got a gold medal in the Olympics in the 70s running barefoot, right?
mm,
You literally do not even need shoes, like in terms of athletic performance or better for your feet or whatever, right? So I was in the military. We had these big clumpy boots to crash through everything. So for a long time, I was the same way. And I went to MMA class, and they had me, you don't wear shoes on the mat, right?
Mm.
And you don't even wear socks. I was like, can I please just wear my socks? I feel naked. And I tried to just do a very basic, like we're warming up, so you're kind of you're stepping out and then in. It's like as if you're like circling around.
Yeah.
And I almost immediately fell over. I was like a baby deer, like I tripped up on my own feet. And I was like, wow, why is that? That made me really curious. I started looking into it, and it's like, yeah, our feet are like kind of like our mouths. Our feet don't develop properly. They basically get crushed by your shoes. If you look at a little baby's feet, or you can look up pictures of like hunter-gatherer feet, the toes are splayed out. The ball of the foot's very wide. The arches are like stacked on each other. The
Mm.
Not the arch, the back of the foot, whatever you call that.
Mm.
The arch is like nice and developed. It's basically like if you wore like it's almost like that Chinese foot binding,
Yeah.
but like on a
Yeah.
more subtle scale.
Yeah.
Or it'd be like if you wore like oven mitts your whole life and then you took them off one day. Like it's just, you know, the, it's hard to explain because everybody thinks it's weird, right? But yeah, anyway. Um, but I've found, your feet amazingly, thankfully, can still change even after you've been doing that your whole life.
Mm.
So I can run barefoot. I walk barefoot all the time. I have barefoot shoes because obviously, obviously we have foot protection for a reason. But there's a difference between a moccasin, which is or something like that, or sandals even,
Mm.
where you're just kind of covering just a small, you're protecting the shoe, but it's like a really soft, thin, very malleable covering
Yeah.
versus like this clunky plastic abomination that that doesn't have any kind of. And then you wear that your
Flexibility.
whole
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wear that your whole life. Your knees get messed up, your hips get messed up because of the way that you're generating force when you step and run, the way that you're standing and your posture is, and then they can sell you some inserts. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
It's like
So
if you raise children strapping them into a wheelchair 24 hours a day, then
right.
they wouldn't be able to stand up. Their legs would
Hmm.
never develop.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's again, I can't stress enough. Like almost any section of society you look at, uh, here's an example, right? Um, with like your skin. Um, so people, or your hair even, people buy these products, right? And you basically you have this really high intensity detergent. You strip all the oil off your skin or your hair. You kill all the microbes, and then you've got to get conditioner to kind of undo what you just did.
Yeah.
And then people are like, yeah, let me do what do they call it? I don't know, like a mud bath, or let me do a skin soak, or they do all these things to try to make their skin healthy again. And it's like, if you cut all that out, you give it like 2 weeks where your body freaks out because it's been fighting off, it's been fighting off you basically this whole time.
Yeah.
Then it'll level out. You and your skin can take care of itself. Your hair can take care of itself. Like, and you might not believe me. The audience is probably like, okay, I bet he smells bad. I promise you, my wife would tell me, right? Or my coworkers or whoever, right? So I just use water almost every single time if I'm going to shower or something like that, or with my hair. And yeah, as far as I can tell, I couldn't tell you if this is the scientific reason, but I believe my skin microbiome has um, replenished itself,
Yeah.
so I don't have like weird smells or whatever, and I can just, you know, not have to intervene basically constantly all the time, right?
So at least part of the science I've seen on that, there's a skin bacterium that converts ammonia that smells like, smelly urinals,
Hmm.
that is gets onto your skin. It converts that into odorless nitrate, which
Okay,
itself
interesting.
lowers the pH of the skin that makes it harder for other nasty bacteria to grow on your skin.
Hmm.
But that particular microbe that breaks down the smelly chemicals is extremely sensitive to soap. So if you
Right.
soap up your whole body on a regular basis, you kill off that whole population, and then your skin starts to smell bad, and then you start using
Yeah. Now you
deodorants to
need
kind of
soap.
cover up that problem.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And there's so many examples. I mean, any aspect of life you want to look into that has an analogy there, right? I
Uh,
think.
no, you
Oh, go
mentioned
ahead.
you mentioned MMA as well too, and this is another. I don't know. I did a little bit of martial arts when I was in high school, but I never
Oh,
really
that's
got
cool.
back to
Yeah.
it seriously. But I could see the use and the advantages of it, and I wonder if
Hmm.
that's brought any new perspectives to you.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that there's three main advantages. The first obvious one is I know how to fight, right? At least with my bare hands, which is not really that great of an advantage, honestly, but um, that leads me to advantage two, which might be a detriment, depends on how, we'll see if it comes up, but is the confidence and the ability to carry yourself knowing that you can defend yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like an aggressive, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna kick everybody's ass in this room, but I mean like in terms of there's just a, I think that, and it doesn't have to be with fighting, but I think that there's kind of a confidence feedback loop of like being able to meet physical challenges and overcome them
Yeah.
that in the modern world we're like totally cut off from, right? Like I think,
Do you think part of it is too, it gives you a sense about what you could actually take on and what you couldn't? You've got a
mhm,
clearer idea about situations that could
mhm.
quickly get out of your control and there's nothing you could do about it. So
Right, yeah,
you're
because
less likely
it's
to put yourself in those situations.
right. You're more likely to be smart about it, or you're not going to have that mental anxiety where you're worrying about it.
Yeah.
A lot of this is kind of true for any sort of high stress situation I've found, which I can get into that later. But a lot of any kind of like high stress or lots of things going on situation, a lot of the issue is actually just in our own minds where we're constantly like, what do I do? What do I do? What about this? What about that? And you're thinking about all these scenarios and you're worrying about this and you're not really sure because if you basically don't have that base of knowing what you're capable of having been through or essentially in training, simulated certain things, it, of course, you're not, what am I trying to say? So what I mean is that if you have that, like, if you know you can carry yourself a certain way, you don't need to worry about if you can or not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like you said, you can position yourself to actually be useful or to respond in a way that you know is ideal versus having to be uncertain about it. And then if you're uncertain in essentially in your body, for lack of a better word, your brain is going to go on overdrive trying to like plan for it.
Yeah.
I'll give you a kind of an analogy here, right? You've been on, you've probably seen this. They'll have somebody walk on like a line, and obviously they have no problem. It's just a line on the ground. And then they'll be like, okay, now walk on this balance beam 10 feet off the ground, same line,
Yeah.
but you can't do it anymore. Well, why is that? It's literally because your brain, part of your brain, that would be thinking about just balancing and walking, is devoting itself to what the hell do I do if I fall, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
trying to come up with a plan. And the answer to that is just fall, right? Like obviously don't like go break your leg, but if you fall and you have a plan, obviously, like you fall on a mat or you roll or something like that, and you do that a few times, your brain's like, oh, okay, I got it. I know what to do if I fall,
Yeah.
right? And then you can walk on the balance beam. It could be 100 feet off the ground. It's the same. It's not that big of a deal to you. Well, maybe 100 feet because you don't know. You get my point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a big deal because you don't have to worry about what you're going to do. You know what you're going to do. You've done it, right? You
2 points. I will say that martial arts was probably one of the best things I did for starting body awareness, which has
mhm,
been useful in all of the farming stuff I've done. I'm better at interrogating what my body is doing when it's going through a new physical challenge.
mhm,
And the
mhm.
other thing is that learning to break fall was probably more
Oh
valuable
yeah.
than learning to block or punch or anything. Because you are going to fall over many times in your life. You may never get into a fight, but you're going to fall
Right.
over. And you're
Oh
more
yeah.
likely to
Absolutely.
end up with a serious injury from that than somebody attacking
Right.
you.
That's funny. Yeah, I always say that like the most I've used kickboxing in my life is like having a like arms full of groceries or children and being able to like use my foot to turn off the light or something or close the door and keep my balance and I go ha when I'm done. But yeah,
I had a
it
massive
definitely
stat.
has a
I had a
go ahead.
massive fall off a bicycle once, like going really fast in the dark.
Mhm.
And however my body reacted, I got up without a scratch. I had a little tiny, like one of those Nokia mobile phones in my pocket that ended up
Yeah.
completely smashed. So
Oh wow.
somehow the energy completely bypassed any part
Yeah,
of my
you put it
body.
in the phone.
Yeah, the phone took it all for me. That was the crumple zone.
Yeah, Wu Wei. Wow, look at that. That's talk about judo. So yeah, what was I thinking about? I one time I had like a drink in my hand. I don't know. I don't remember. I was holding something like a cup, and I was walking by. This is before I met my wife. I saw like some pretty girls, and I got distracted, and I like stepped off um like a sidewalk or something, like
Mm.
like a little ledge, And I did a perfect in jujitsu. You roll all the time.
Yeah.
You roll forwards and backwards as part of your warm ups, and you kind of use it on the mat a little bit. And I did a perfect roll, didn't even spill the drink, and got back up and kept walking like, ladies, like as if I meant to do that. Um, but yeah, that's the most. I wouldn't say that's the most directly useful martial arts has been, because I did, we were talking about trauma. I did like seek out like a really high intensity profession to have for a little bit, just to know I was really capable of dealing with that kind of stuff, which I think
Mm.
is an important part of like mental rewilding. But yeah, in terms of like just average day to day, just not hurting myself, being aware of where my body is, it's very like I I don't even think about it like I'm really cool, like I'm raising the bar. I really just think about it like these are kind of normal every day. Like if you're going to function as a human animal, like you need to be able to, trip and keep your balance or fall and get up. Like it's almost amazing the how modernity has conditioned us to be like totally like, couch potato people,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah. Another thing, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but a lot of martial art traditions were not as individualistically focused as like the
Mhm.
modern Western industrial version. Like it was something the whole
Sure.
village did so that it could, deal with bandits or whatever happened. And do you see that that might be something that needs to be rediscovered in the future?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
particularly rural zones are often uh, more of a target for that kind of banditry when things
Mhm.
fall apart. I've read some really interesting accounts of some of the collapses in Argentina, that it was the people living out in the countryside in isolated houses were targets, whereas those living at least a medium-sized village, there was a strength in numbers there. They weren't as easy to be knocked over by small gangs of opportunists.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point about we kind of do this like settler colonial, like we just need to reproduce our culture as fast as possible. Like we need to get people out there, so we have all this frontier. So we end up with like the little nuclear family houses, and then you've got like 100 acres and a farmhouse, and like that's really weird. Like it looks to me like most of the world, it's like a village. Like you said, you got that strength of numbers. You're all clustered together, and then you go out to the fields, and depending on the culture, those fields are even like basically like communal or public. Like the families will be like, hey, I want to use this lot this year, but then it's not like yours forever. So
Yeah,
like the way we do it, yeah, where you're just totally isolated it seems pretty recent, pretty weird,
yeah.
compared to other cultures.
It's
But yeah,
very
so
it's
in
very
terms,
Roman. It's very late Roman the way we're using the land at the moment.
right, right, yeah. That's just a little side note. Did you know the Romans, this is crazy to me, would like kidnap like travelers and stuff and put them to work in like basically modern day or not modern day, Roman day, like sweatshops. Like they just
Yeah,
chain you up and have you churning out like leather goods or something like that. You'd spend your
yeah.
whole life there. Even, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the plantations too. The most of their farming in the end was done in these giant plantations that were owned by wealthy people in the cities, and they were completely operated by slaves from
Yeah,
all over the empire. Like you didn't put people from the same conquered nation together because they'd get ideas.
yeah, yeah,
And
right,
yeah,
exactly.
when the barbarians turned up, the slaves are just like, it's not my farm. I don't give a stuff. I'm not going to defend it. I'll come and
Right,
join you
yeah, I'll
guys.
get
You seem
happy.
to be you having more fun than I am, so I'll come with
Yeah,
you.
you guys have a better idea than just being a slave. So I don't know why I didn't think of this barbarian thing. Yeah, it's just funny to me because it's like people will obviously our culture tries to model itself off of the Romans, or at least it makes appearances of doing it. And people will be like, "Did you know the Romans were so advanced? They did this and that." And I told somebody that one time when they were telling me how cool the Romans are, and they just were like, they just blinked for a second, and then we're like, "But yeah, did you know they invented the steam engine?" Like they just kind of moved right along. And I don't know. To me, that's like these like social relations are more important because they kind of tell you something about, well, one, how the average person lived back then, but two, if we're consciously modeling ourselves off of them, it's like that kind of, I don't know. That's the part that gives me pause, but
Yeah.
I digress.
Now, you mentioned
So,
too that you've got a family. So
oh,
that,
before
yeah,
we get
before
into
we
that,
move on,
can
yeah,
I,
yeah. Yeah,
the
sure.
martial arts one, I
Oh,
wanted to
yes,
answer
yeah.
that. I got off track.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah, if you look at martial arts around the world in different countries, you have, I mean, folk wrestling, obviously, that's like everywhere. Like every society I've can read about. Even the hunter-gatherers will have some sort of like grappling that's like specific to them. And that doesn't mean they're like amazing at it, but everybody does it, right?
Yeah.
I think who was it? Like, I don't know, Socrates or somebody said that the thing most like infantry training and being a soldier or a foot soldier in a melee dominated era was wrestling. So you definitely see that very commonly. And that's kind of still popular in the country, but it's not, like you said, it's not done with a communal context. Like, no, we're all not all getting together in the
A,
village
a,
square
qu-
to
a
like have
quick
the young men compete. Go
a
ahead.
quick thought. Do you think that form of physical competition is trained as a way of diverting people away from going for more lethal ways of
Hmm.
engaging in conflict? Like if tempers flare in a small
Hmm.
community, usually between the young men, that if they
Yeah,
are trained in that kind of wrestling, it becomes like a duel. It's a whereas if they didn't have that as a go-to, they're more likely to
right.
grab a spear or like hit someone over the head, like to cause serious long-term injuries that damage the whole community.
I I think having a dueling honor culture would definitely be a way to route and express otherwise violent tendencies,
Yeah.
right? Like you basically can kind of see this is a very interesting. I don't know if it's a transition or just a pattern in the sense of like, I don't know if this is how everybody was and then it changed, or if this is just how some cultures develop. But you'll get these tiny groups that aren't necessarily hunter-gatherers. I was just reading this study the other day. It's about the Jabusi. I don't want to mispronounce their name, but they're on the island of Papua New Guinea, and but they've retained a lot of the leveling mechanisms of hunter-gatherers, even though they're horticulturalists, and so they can't, they actually really don't have the ability to create like war parties and go fight against their neighbors who are like encroaching on them.
Hmm.
They don't. They're super leveled. They don't really have leaders. They hardly have material possessions. They treat the kids really well. They're not like beating the hell out of them. Men and women are fairly equal. The men are like smoking weed, hanging out all day, and they have like the highest murder rate in the world because they'll just like if you like they basically really, really, really uh, shun social aggression and displays of aggression, like fighting.
Yeah.
And so what happens is it's usually between the men, and I think it's usually like one of them's running around on the other one's wife or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And they'll just kind of like make eye contact, and it's like
It's on.
before, yeah, because that's, but they've been like suppressing it the whole time,
Yeah.
and then they just go, and then that guy's dead, the other guy's alive, and then it's amazing. Like 30 minutes later, they're like everybody's, oh, that never happened. We never do that. So it's compared to their neighbors, or you can see this pattern in other countries, or other cultures, I should say, that do have war, even if it's ritualized war, where they're not actually killing each other or there's really low death rates. It's more of like a performance. But the ones who do have war, they'll have a much stronger prohibitions about aggression within the group.
Yeah.
It's kind of like save that for the enemy.
Yeah.
And I think they do tend to have more of that dueling culture versus like everybody just happens to be really good at hunting. So now everybody's like a really armed maniac. So they're able to like culturally kind of express that in I don't know if I'd say it's a better way, but it's in a different way, right? Compared to doing it within the group, but now you can't rally your people to defend against like encroachment and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that definitely having a dual culture, having an honor culture where you don't, you either like you said, you maybe you duel it out, or you're like, hey, we need to save that for tribe B over there. This is tribe A. We don't do that in tribe A, right? Um, but yeah, just to finish up though, I was going to say, you can also see really pertinent to what your example was. Uh, there was this, I think it's literally called like the bandit period or something like that in China, when like when the kingdom had collapsed, and I'm not well versed on Chinese history, but it's like their equivalent of the Dark Ages, right?
Yeah.
And they had these like monasteries that would get the bandits would try to raid them, and so all of the monks, in addition to being a monk and farming full time, they also learn martial arts, and they were learning like I think kung fu, Shaolin kung fu. That's
Yeah.
where this
Yeah.
comes from.
Mm.
Essentially, they still do it to this day. It's pretty cool stuff, actually. They're learning to like fight multiple opponents and all these weapons and stuff. It's kind of cool. But yeah, the point is they one for one had kind of what you're talking about, where they're worried about bandits, so everybody knew had to learn how to fight, and like you said, they're doing it as a group. And it got to the point where they were so good at it, apparently, I guess. I don't know, maybe they weren't good, maybe they were just the only ones who could afford weapons or something. But um, that in Japan, similar concept, they warrior monks would go fight in wars and they would get hired on and they would like, there was a period where they were like, they could decisively turn battles depending on who they decided to back up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And install different people. So yeah, there's definitely you can see a pattern of people doing that. And I was just going to say too, Muay Thai. I don't think this is a good thing, but the kids there start their pro careers at like 7 years old, and
wow,
they're never formally instructed before that. They just watch the adults, and they kind of pick it up from practicing in a similar way that the adults are until like maybe 6, and they're like, okay, I'll start to teach you something directly. So you can definitely kind of see that. Um, yeah, you can see how like even with a relaxed, playful, observational mentality, people could be learning these martial skills that one maybe could translate to using weapons, and two, mentality wise, they definitely do because you're going to be able to be calm, focused, all those things I said. So, not to rant, but I just wanted to get that point out.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Um, so I wanted to also talk about parenting. Your
Hmm.
thoughts on, I don't know, reclaiming,
Right.
optimizing that, because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's something outside of my experience, and it's so
Oh yeah.
vital to any culture that fails to get
Hmm.
that right has a very
Yeah.
short timeline ahead of us. And
Yeah.
I
It's
think our Western society has kind of stumbled into
yeah.
that major issue.
I often say that it's like when people talk about how expensive it is to have kids, how hard it is to have kids because of our like really individualized culture, I'm like, man, what society would so, um, opposite of emphasize, would basically make it so hard, so discourage people from having children that you basically are like not going to have another generation. It's like, it's just kind of an amazing failure of a culture that the basic function of reproducing itself is not only not central like it used to be, but that culture being able to reproduce itself is like actively stigmatized, almost, maybe not
Mm,
stigmatized, depending on but again, there's a word I'm looking for here I can't find, but yeah, again, basically discouraged, like, disincentivized,
yeah.
right? they
Well,
they make it incentivized to not have kids.
to put it in
So
perspective, in the US as an example, if current demographic trends don't change, it'll
mhm.
be like majority Amish within a century.
That's funny. Maybe they're the ones who are going to inherit the earth.
Well, I mean, they do a decent job with it. We could do
Yeah, they got
worse.
sick beards. I mean, I can't really. They might have better ideas than we do. Um, Gosh, let me think. Yeah, so okay. So basically, when it comes to parenting, right? I I think that our culture is really, really good at reproducing like traumatized, isolated people who kind of just are conformists and go along with the system, basically,
Yeah.
like whether it's medieval peasants or office drones. And that's all it's really good at making, but that's all it needs to do. Like, it doesn't matter if you're happy and you're fulfilled and you're self actualized, or even if you just like are stable, right? It just matters that you go on to continue to reproduce more like workers for the factory, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you study different parenting cultures around the world, I mean, there's aspects that we can't help in the West. Like we were talking about it before the interview, but how it's pretty nucleated. I mean, families don't really like stick together like in multi-generational homes, let alone in like villages and tribes and all that. So you can't just like turn your kid out and have like, his older cousins or his aunt or people helping watch them, right?
Mm.
It's kind of all on you and maybe other parents who have kids that are your age, right? So you can't help those aspects, unfortunately, or you can, but it's certainly tough. But there is aspects you can help, right? And basically, I guess I would characterize our culture as, um, and let me caveat by saying I don't think anybody is like a bad parent for parenting in like a normal way. I think everybody just does what they've been taught, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I just don't want to make it sound like I'm attacking anybody. It's just like we're exposed to what we're exposed to, right? But basically, our parenting culture is basically kind of about, um, kind of more or less establishing like a dominance relationship. with your children. Like it's very much like I'm an authority figure and they're going to listen to me
Mm.
and you're going to do what I want. And it kind of is based around we have these, and everybody disagrees on what the ideas are, but nobody steps back and is like, okay, but we're all agreeing that we need to like program them with our ideas, right? It's basically just like you're going to reproduce your values in this child. Like you need to churn them into
And,
the
and
this
we,
like.
we also agree that like the outside world is so hostile to humanity that we need to like precondition them to survive it. It's like
Mhm.
strapping heavy shoes to their feet because there's rusty nails everywhere.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely like, you're very like fear, anxious mentality that's getting put into them about the world and the people in it, the opportunities. It's a lot of like stress and reactivity,
Yeah,
mentally speaking.
yeah.
It's not a lot of like confidence and ability to like explore the world on your own, right? Um, Gosh, what was I saying? So yeah, basically my approach to parenting, I read this book. Well, I did a lot of research on my own. I read this book that I thought it's pretty good as like an intro to the thinking. You don't need to take it like word for word. It's just kind of an overview. Honestly, I mean, she worked against herself here because she's made like news articles and interviews where she kind of tells you like most of the contents of the book. But it's called Hunt, Gather, Parent by Dr. Micheline Duclef, something like that.
Hmm.
And she went and lived with like the Maya, with the Inuit, and with another group that escapes me now, and like observe their parenting cultures, right? But yeah, basically, it's some general principles. Um, I always say that I want my kid to happen to the world. I don't want the world to happen to him, right?
I like that.
And so I kind of view my role instead of like I'm going to mold him into the perfect like piece of wheat, is like I'm kind of like here to support him, and I just kind of send him out as much as he wants to. Like I found that kids are already like really good if you just get out of their way. They're perfect little like machines at finding out their limits and gradually, maybe not even gradually, but with their comfort, getting past those. Right? Like for
Yeah.
example, getting hurt. A lot of parents are really afraid of their kids getting hurt. Like they're like helicopter parenting them, right? And yeah, it's scary at first, but if just let them go, they'll bump into stuff and they'll hurt themselves and they'll fall over. And then that's where I swoop in and I'm emotionally very there for my kid. Like I'm not kind of like mad at him that he got hurt, right? Or telling him not to do it again. I'm like, yeah, it's okay, buddy. I just hold him. And then at this point now, I mean, he could be running full force, trip, fall, cry, and in less than 10 seconds, he's like, okay, I'll go play. And like he's good. He just runs back out. Um, so they're super resilient, right? Like they naturally are just very experimental. They're super confident. They just want to play and explore the world, right? Um, Along with that, I guess I'd say modernity, you know, here's an obvious example. Where does everybody keep the chemicals in their house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Under the bathroom sink, right? So, or under the kitchen sink. So it's like we kind of can't let our kids just go with the way that normal people are told that they're supposed to live. But kind of just like the rewilding with the stuff you were talking about with like says say bacteria, I we kind of just childproof the house in the sense of like all the chemicals. Well, you know what? I'll put those in a top shelf.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, what's another example? Something fragile and breakable. Maybe I'll put that in like a back room or something that I'm not, where I'm not like really worried about him getting into it. So my house is like a safe zone where I can just set him down and I know like it doesn't really matter where he gets into because I've made it safe versus me having to like put him in a little cage basically to keep him out of everything, right?
It's the rest of the world where it gets tricky. Like you see
Hmm.
medieval paintings of like just hordes of children playing in the street,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
now they would all be like run down and
yeah.
killed.
Seriously.
And that was when there was
So
like horse carts and stuff going around.
yeah, 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 yeah. And well, and one would come and you'd have to run out of the way. Like they're like, car, and then you get out of the way, and hopefully nobody got hit, I guess. Um, but so that's a good example, right? It's kind of like with having other people help with kids, because just to touch on that point for a second, it's not supposed to be all on us. It is pretty hard and stressful. You've got to do a lot of, meditation and stoicism and just really kind of like helping direct the contents of your mind so you don't get overwhelmed and be like, man, this is so hard. I'm going to leave this guy on the woods. Why am I doing this? But just like not having other people to help you with kids, Yeah, it's true. You can't control everything in the world. But I have found that if kids are acquainted, it's always a feedback process with the world, right? It's a relationship. And because I've let my kids get out there and experiment and be a part of the world, they have a pretty good sense of when they're getting into something dangerous. Now, I
Yeah.
will say with
Yeah.
this street, they can't just, unfortunately, until they're much older, probably, I can't just take my eye off him and I know he's not going to go there. He probably won't, honestly, because he knows I'm just going to be like, I know, bud, I'm sorry, but I got to hold your hand. I don't make a big thing about it, but it's just what we do.
Yeah.
But even like the playground or something, or even out in the woods, right? An environment where maybe other people would be like a little more concerned. I'm just 100% like I know he's fine. Like even if he's going to run up, and he's 3 by the way. So and I've been doing this since he was 1. So well since he was born, but obviously he's been pretty independent since he was 1. So
Yeah.
don't think this is like a later in life thing.
Yeah.
But even if he runs up to like the top of the playground where it's like there's an opening and there's like a little pole, I'm not really worried he's going to fall because he knows what a ledge is. He's
Yeah.
seen one, right? Even my 1-year-old probably would go up and be like, "Oh, that's a ledge," right? I might be standing there just in case he doesn't, but you get what I'm saying? Like they're able to kind of calibrate to the world around them instead of
Yeah.
me having to intervene all the time, like he's going to get, you know,
I,
like he's
I
going to break his neck the first time he bumps into something.
I just noticed something really interesting. The idea of the word playground implies that that is the only designated, limited space where play is permitted, and
Yeah,
everywhere else is probably too dangerous for you to play. If you go
yeah,
back in time, children played everywhere. There was almost
mhm,
nowhere that they couldn't go.
right.
And
Yeah, that
it
is
reminds,
interesting.
well, it reminds me a little bit too. I saw a quote recently that if you time traveled back to ancient Egypt and you explained the concept of religion to them, they wouldn't
Mhm.
understand because religion was everywhere and it was part of everything. It wasn't something that just happened in a church.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was only later when secularism kind of colonized the rest of the landscape that religion got kind of pushed into one tiny little designated space
yeah,
where
yeah,
you
yeah.
just
That's
go for a
like this is
limited
the
amount
time
of
for that.
time. Yeah, you only go
And I
there.
think, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you get the idea. You get the idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think probably the Egyptians, if I had to guess, were going to be more ritual based too, right? Our modern religion is very belief based,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
up in
and
our
it's
heads.
about essentially like ideological conformity, right? Versus practice based or ritual based ones, where, like with the Romans, for example, like they take over people, and to a belief based culture like us, it seems very strange that they could just syncretize all their gods with the local gods and nobody minded. But it was way more about the rituals they were doing versus the names that they called people or the exact like way that you characterized a certain, let's say, natural force or whatever the case may be,
Mm.
because it was those communal activities that were bonding people together, not the profession of a particular belief, right? So like, I would say in a sense, science grows out of that mentality because it still has the same like universal abstract truth that we all need to agree on is the truth instead of one that's more based on like again like communal togetherness, like almost like think about like a music concert,
Yeah,
like that's one of the only times where you can have a crowd of people and be like, I think we, well, if you're thinking this, you aren't, but you could be like, we all have the same thing on our minds right now,
yeah,
we're all
yeah.
going through this same process as a crowd, right? The band doesn't matter so much is basically the metaphor here.
I
So
I reckon broadcast TV, when it used to be like three channels, served
mhm.
that function for, I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know, kind of 1950s to probably the 90s. That and this is kind of similar to what I think the Bible used to do, that you could travel anywhere in Europe and you could
Mhm.
talk about a story from the Bible and the person would know what you were talking about. In the same
Mhm.
way that at work, you could go to the water cooler and say, "Oh, did you watch Dynasty last night?"
Right.
And you could probably find someone to like, talk about the details. And
Yeah, definitely.
that feels like something that we've kind of lost in the digital age, that it's been exploded into a million tiny little pieces. And
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
some of it, sometimes a little tiny thing will bubble to the surface and it'll, like Gangnam Style is probably like the
Yeah,
last example of that
it'll
kind
get
of,
the popular imagination for like a week and then we all
and then
forget
it's
about it
gone.
again.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
weird. It almost feels like a brain that's almost like it's going through an epileptic seizure, that it's just getting these occasional coordinated flashes of it's a signal that it's not doing anything anymore. I
Yeah,
don't
we've
know.
broken down that like cultural unity where like we all kind of um it's like the news, you'd all watch the same news and he's like, okay, this has been whoever the hell signing off. And then you pretty much know like everybody just got that same news, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And you can all talk about it and it's all on your mind. Versus now it's like there's absolutely no connection between what like you said with entertainment, like there's no connection between what that guy's watching on Netflix, your coworker or your neighbor or whatever, and you, or even on your phones all day.
yeah.
It's actually quite literally like we all have this curated, um,
Well, that's
literally the
the
algorithm, right?
yeah, that's what I was going to say. The only thing that's really tying us together is it's the same algorithm or a small
Right.
handful of algorithms, but they're kind of, I don't know, they're below the surface. And yeah, it's interesting. Like it's giving us what we want, but it's not really what we want. It's kind
Yeah.
of a paradox.
Um, Before I forget it, I just want to throw out real quick the kind of parenting I was talking about. It's called attachment parenting, and
Uh-huh.
just if anybody's interested, just that like that's the term to look up.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that's helpful to people. But yeah, just before I forget, I wanted to talk about like AI with you, and not AI in the sense of like, oh, it's gonna become Skynet and take over, because I think we both agree that it's not actually as nearly as powerful as people think it is.
Mm.
But I think AI, what I'm concerned about is the fact that um, it's basically like, I think it's almost the final form of the process we're discussing, where culture doesn't have this one unifying monoculture anymore, and it's kind of like become more and more individual, more and more personal, right? And so I think the final form of that is AI, in the sense that it literally, I don't know if you've been keeping up maybe with the recent developments, but it quite literally can show you whatever now, right? Like if you've seen those videos of people who are like, I don't know, what was it, Aaron Trump, I think's his name, Trump's son. He's
Oh,
like playing
Baron.
piano. Barron, thank you, saying he's going to be the next president. And like all the boomers in the comments are like, oh, God bless you, Barron, you play so well. Like there's already a substantial portion of the population that cannot tell that these are AI videos, and they're not even that advanced yet, right? Or another kind of really sad example somebody showed me the other day is there's a service out there, um, to have an AI video, like you have your kids talk to it, and then it'll call grandma for you and pretend to be your grandkids so that your grandkids talk to it. I know. It's so sad. Like it was hilarious at the time, but now it's just sad because I'm like, Jesus Christ, like what the hell happened to us? Like, and so the person presented it like they kind of glossed over that part because they were like, yeah, and then it got hacked and people are taking money, and I'm like, I think the hackers deserve the money more. I mean, they probably care more about the grandparents than their kids do. But anyway, the point is though, I mean, we're reaching a level where AI can literally like, culturally speaking, I I don't know if I should be optimistic or pessimistic that we're reaching a point where people might literally be like, okay, the demon box in my hand, I literally can't tell what's real on this anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like it used to always it's always been kind of like, what echo chamber do you want to be in, and if you want
Yeah.
to find some sort of consensus, you have to like really search. But now it might literally become like, you know, like I have no idea if it's real. Was there a nuclear war yesterday? I don't know. Like I'm just gonna go to work. Um, I don't know if this will be a revitalization of people having real life human interactions. Like in a way, maybe the system defeated itself because
Yeah.
it's a mindless robot, or if it'll be the other way around and people will be like, I love this hug box. Like it's literally preferable to reality because it'll
I
show me anything I want.
I think there's a lot of parallels between the cultural cycle of, I guess I'll call it junk food and junk
Hmm.
culture. And
Okay.
like if you went back to the 90s, almost nobody was questioning the food that was provided by the industrial system. We were just kind of
Yeah.
putting up with the steadily growing tide of chronic problems that no doctor had any idea what to do with. And
Interesting. Yeah.
in this, fast forward 30 years later, and it's become really common for people to go through the process that you and I have gone through of figuring out,
Hmm.
the ins and outs of how our particular system deals with, the mostly crap food that is the thing that's pushed
Yeah.
to the front of to the convenient options. And I think a similar thing is happening with the culture that if anything, AI is going to highlight like how bad and how unnutritious the offerings are.
Hmm.
That it's I don't know. I almost see it like it's an opportunity. It's a training exercise
Right.
that makes us less naive than our
Hmm.
grandparents and great grandparents. I mean, even like let's lionize like hunter gatherers or medieval peasants that like pretty much
Yeah.
had this sorted or solved in their time.
Yeah.
They didn't
Not a
know
cell phone in
why.
sight,
They
living in
couldn't
the moment,
explain
enjoy the
why, and
chrysalis.
that's why they were vulnerable to things falling apart. Like when it industrialized or when agriculture came along. Both of
Hmm.
those transformations kind of wrecked people's health to begin, but eventually people figured out they muddled together solutions. And
Okay,
I
interesting.
think I think we're going to go through a similar thing culturally that and not everyone is going to make it through that
Yeah.
process. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, that's what I was gonna
particularly when you tie it back to demographics, if you know, sit in school for 5 hours a day and you believe everything they tell you about, crushing your personality so that you'll fit into an office cubicle, and
say.
then
Yeah.
finding
Gosh.
that you lack either the health or the resources or the courage to have your own children, then that's
Hmm.
basically extinction for
Yeah.
you, for your potential.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Exactly.
so
That is
yeah,
interesting.
it's going to
I
change
um
humanity.
I just wanted to add, there's this like tribe in the Amazon, and they're not like uncontacted, but they kind of more or less still live their traditional lifestyles. And there was like some big push for some reason. I don't know why. I mean, I guess he had his reasons. I suppose he would know better than me, but this guy from the tribe that was like kind of their advocate in the cities and stuff, pushed for them to get internet. And so now it's like they're not hunter-gatherers, they're horticulturalists. So
Yeah,
they have certain traditions, like for example, they don't show like affection in public. Um, um, just things like that. You'll see when horticulturalists happen, like weird cultural things spring up because it's like they've got to keep society going, but they're dealing with the pressures that would kind of lead to states later, like surplus and wealth and all that. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm off topic, but the point is, yeah. So the elders are like, yeah, now everybody's like addicted to porn and when nobody will work. They just sit on their phone all day. Like we got to turn the internet off every once a week so we can plant stuff. And it's like, man, their culture just fell apart overnight, huh? Like it's amazing, like you said, how nobody you could have something that's been working for thousands of years, but then you have this disruptive outside thing come in that nobody knows about, nobody's prepared for,
Yeah,
and it just turns it all upside down. And nobody has these, they don't have the cultural mechanisms, I guess, to be
yeah.
able to incorporate
It,
that and deal with
it's almost like an epidemic. Like you have to train the collective immune system
it. Hmm.
to resist this new thing that's exploiting an
Yeah,
old vulnerability. And
right.
it's not a process that's ever going to be finished. Like it's complex biological systems. There's always going to be new things that pop up to try and
Yeah,
exploit old
yeah, that's a
weaknesses.
good point. Yeah, I've come to the same mind of you about it, where I was like, honestly, it's not really optimistic or pessimistic. It's more like a filter. It's like a selection effect.
Yeah,
Kind of like collapse in general. It's kind of interesting that we probably live, I think, if I had to guess, we're the only time period where people who are really into conceptual, abstract information do way better than everybody else, right?
yeah,
Like before the accumulation of this stuff, I guess maybe unless you were going to be like a scribe, like if you're going to be like a tag along for the emperor, maybe you could have done well with being like a real nerdy guy, basically.
mm,
But otherwise, people who value like social proof to get their knowledge, for example, that probably was a winning bet for most of human history. Or if you valued like direct experience to get your knowledge, things like that, right? Versus us, and by us I mean me and you, like people like me and you who are like really kind of academic and try to get like all of this third person, institutional knowledge are like the only ones basically who can like you said, make these choices about diet and health, make these choices about like media consumption and what's good for you and what's bad for you. Not that other people can't do it, but like obviously if you're not into this kind of stuff, and you're just going based on like the folk version of this knowledge, right? Like the way people are, like people who are doing like a cucumber diet or something like that to lose
Yeah.
weight. Like they don't have a good foundation of calories in and calories out, and they don't have a good understanding of like macronutrients or whatever. They're just like, oh yeah, they said they did the grapefruit diet, Janet, at work or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So um, yeah, it's just very interesting to think like there's this strange filtering effect where, yeah, people who are into this abstract information are being selected, that we're like resisting the phone and resisting the AI and all this other stuff. I'm legitimately contemplating getting a flip phone just because it's like I was like, man, it dawned on me when I heard about that the scammer call thing I told you about that calls grandma.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, wow, they're already mining all our data, right? I mean, in a year or two, you could get an AI call. Well, you could get a call from your brother or something. And he's like, Shane, oh my God, I just got in a car wreck. Can you wire me $500? Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
there could be something like that where they know everything about you. They've already mined all your data. And if you don't know about it ahead of time, there's no particular reason like that these things couldn't just be like wildfire, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a scam or whether somebody hacks the news and they're showing you pictures of like Russia invading. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of potential for disruption, and essentially, like you said, it's like a disease. If this is an epidemic, there's only, you're either inoculating yourself ahead of time or it's going to be, like
It'll
the next
take you
plague.
down. Do
Yeah,
you know
it's
what
like a
it makes?
media plague.
Do you know what it kind of makes me wonder? What an analogy? Like a martial arts movie where the hero like goes to take on some opposing force, and the first room they go into, there's like a low level thug that they have to like
Right,
struggle to beat, but they get stronger through that process, and then they go to the
right.
next level, and there's someone more skilled, and eventually they get to like the big boss's room, and
Yeah,
now they're in a position where they could actually take them on. Whereas if they'd hit the big boss first, or all of them at
yeah,
once, they would have just
right.
been completely wiped off the map.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and it almost feels like our cultural evolution is building us up. It's giving us new sets of skills to handle things that previous generations like never would have even contemplated being able to do. And
right.
if we
This
are
is like
faith
overnight if we've
and
gone to that
and
from like
but the
100 years
really
ago.
interesting thing with all this information technology is that if my worldview is correct, it may not actually be around for that much longer. Like the
Hmm.
resources and the stability needed to make something like the internet and then AI even more complex on top of that work, that could
Hmm.
be gone in 50 years, like
Yeah,
just for lack of fossil fuels.
yeah,
How does culture respond to building up all of this psychological cultural strength and then
right.
having the weights, that classic thing in a martial arts movie where they reveal they had like heavy weights on their arms and legs the whole time and they're only
Right,
fighting at
yeah,
like half their speed.
yeah.
Is there going to be some weird kind of like snapback cultural psychological effect when the AI goes away or when people even abandon it because it just becomes too
Yeah,
annoying?
yeah, exactly, right. And then they might have to, do real life stuff with meet humans and make
But
eye
but we
contact with people. It's
but
terrifying.
but we won't just be medieval people when we put our
Right,
mobile phones down. We're going to be different.
right. It is very interesting because it's like, in a way, it's like almost like I said earlier, like how it's defeated itself, our culture, right? We're kind of wiping the slate clean in terms of like the myths and ideologies and beliefs that established uh, empire, right? This
Yeah,
global machine that we've built. We've all kind of forgotten, in a good way, I would say, um, all the ideologies that we used to use to carry forward these beliefs, right?
yeah,
Like, um, conversely, though, I mean, we all do have. Maybe it's a bit like we were talking about how we're in a position to like take crops we can eat, take herbal medicines and bring them together from around the world, whatever the case may be, right? We could we're kind of maybe informationally in a position where people are going to be taking the best ideas, maybe not even consciously, but maybe just the most useful ideas, like germ theory, right? Like it's not even necessarily that you have to retain the ideal of knowledge of germs, but if you're remembering the uh, rituals that people were doing to get rid of them, then you have the same effect, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So like maybe it's like that possibly. Like it's just
yeah.
going to be a bunch of ideas that get shaken together, like the best of what science could produce, and we'll see what the next culture carries on. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I see today as like a mass global cultural hybridization experiment that's going to have
Hmm.
this explosive radiation of different combinations and variations that are successful at different times and places around the world. So
Right.
I think there's like a the rise and collapse of industrial civilization doesn't have to be framed as like this mistake that we should have avoided doing. I mean, what's the
Right.
point in thinking other than just feeling miserable?
Yeah.
I see it as a bigger transformation than the start of agriculture. That
Sure.
it's going to
Potentially.
shake things up in ways that wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, the stage is definitely set for like, I mean, like you've kind of talked about in your books, especially Taming the Apocalypse. I really love that.
Yeah.
The ability to like essentially remake ourselves as a species, right? I mean, and again, it doesn't even have to necessarily be a conscious thing anybody's trying to do. It's just the kind of the facts of the situation because we can't really revert to pre-industrial ways of living, even just in terms of the technology and the skill use that we've lost, even ignoring that part. Obviously, like you've talked about, the land, the soil, the weather, the literal climate that allowed agriculture in the Holocene, whatever factor you want to look at, things have changed drastically, right? We can't even go back to like hunting and gathering because there's like hardly any wild animals and all the ecosystems are degraded, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But just like there's recombinant ecosystems where like invasive species that don't have a history together can somehow come together and form an actual functional ecosystem again, right?
Mm.
You could imagine that there can be recombinations of people, like you said, basically hybrid cultures, um, where we're coming together and in some ways maybe being how we were before. Maybe we can be more decentralized. Maybe we can be more egalitarian. These are things I would like to see, but who knows, right?
Hmm.
But in other ways, be totally different. I mean, like you've done with your canna starch idea. If we had like a starch-based society, or I think you had talked about like fat-based societies before, like how basically that hasn't been done, which I didn't realize. That's super cool.
Yeah.
If the energy economics changes, and like the only way to grow food is like these weird canna tubers or this weird like acorn uh, starch crops or whatever the case may be instead of like annual grain,
Mm.
that will have ripple up, ripple across effects all the way up to how society would have organized. Um, it could be like a totally different kind of state society, for example, instead of based on annual extractive grain, it could be based on like um, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the point. We can't really even picture it, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, the stage is definitely set for some new weird thing that's never happened, or a thousand new weird things that's never happened.
I always try and imagine how you would explain Babylon to a Middle Eastern hunter-gatherer from like, just a couple of
Mhm.
thousand years before it appeared. Like
Right.
it would seem completely fanciful. Like they wouldn't even have the words to get their head around like the scale and the activity that happened
Yeah.
inside it. And that was just based on a couple of random hybrid annuals and a change in the climate.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely like, for better or for worse, it is kind of amazing to think about the, you know, completely transformative impact we've had on the planet, right?
Mm.
When we're literally just a bunch of monkeys that figured out, I mean, I guess fire on a basic level, even fire alone, that's kind of crazy, right? I mean,
Well,
to be able to release the stored chemical energy of
yeah,
something and use it
that
to cook something
changed the
else.
whole metabolism of being human.
Right.
So it's again, it's an example of that fundamental change at the foundation of how everything's put into motion, and then all of the
Mhm.
consequences that flow out of that that you could probably never predict in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the next 10,000 years might be, equally or more transformative than the last, but we can't. We're at that like event horizon line
Yeah,
where, we can say, okay, for sure this is falling apart, and we can be like, okay, maybe like having a entirely grain diet wasn't so good, or maybe having a, whatever the case may be,
yeah,
but all we can do is put these pieces together, and then it's honestly, I mean, we're just a part of the chain, right? Like it's going to be our descendants that are really making like no matter what, even if there's like a nuclear war tomorrow, it's a multi-generational process of people adapting and cultures shifting and being born and new adaptations and all that, right?
Yeah.
So if there's, yeah, it's going to be whatever it is. I wish I could live to see all of it, honestly, it's going to be really interesting.
Well, I mean, I just take a sandbox approach. Basically, I try and locate and refine as many tools that I can think might be useful and put them in the hands of the next generation because they're the ones who are going to
Mhm.
have to figure out which of them are useful and in what combination.
Right, yeah. Um, oh, that reminds me. I was going to say there was this society I read about that didn't have any cavities, even though they had a super grain diet, and it's because they had it's not chufa, but it's the related one. It's like the purple nutsedge, I
Oh,
think,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it has antibiotic leaves, and they would chew those, and it would like sterilize.
Um,
It's basically like mouthwash, right?
yeah,
So you get little examples like that, where yeah, like you said, it's like a sandbox. You could put together like, okay, this herbal medicine over here is good for this, and this one over in like this other continent is good for this, and I could have them both in my yard. Like we'll never be in this time again, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like if we're not, I mean, you already know this, it's your premise, right? But interesting nonetheless.
Hey, one thing you wanted to talk to me about too was what would you call them? I hate to use the word religion. Like I said before, it's this modern in the last few thousand years or even centuries way of looking at things. But
Hmm.
shamanism and mindfulness and trance and stoicism and collective feeling, esoteric, mystical feeling.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
tell me about your kind of thoughts around all of that, because I think it's a fundamental ingredient for human societies that's kind of been
Right.
washed out in modernity.
Hmm.
It's like omega-3 fatty acids. We're all craving it, but we don't
Yeah, we don't even
know where
know.
to look for it.
Right. Okay, how do I Okay. So, the ability to make meaning, right? The ability to create and define meaning and reproduce that culturally. If you understand what I mean by meaning, I
Yeah,
mean in the literal sense of like making sense of the world, explaining what it is, why we're here, what things are, and how we interact with them, whatever, right?
yeah.
That is a skill that is entirely lost to us as modern people, almost, right?
Mm.
We have been being selected for meaning following for the last like 1,000 years, or probably more than that, right? Probably like actually several thousand years. So we're really, really good at like following somebody else's meaning. We're really, really bad at making meaning for ourselves. And
Mhm.
so that is kind of like the amazing thing about it, though, is that it's not really as hard as it sounds. Um, there's kind of this tradition in the West of like we need to find the lost knowledge, like we need to find the lost myth of the past, right? Where we, for some reason, I kind of want to look into this. It's very interesting. I wonder where it comes from, but there's this idea of the original myth that like anthropologists used to look for in like the 1900s,
Mhm.
where it's like they're trying to go back to like the very first stories and stuff like that, right? Like kind of this idea of like a lost truth. And the point is that none of that really matters all that much, right? If you actually study the cultures that these more human scale cultures, these more decentralized kind of egalitarian cultures, they're really good at constantly reinventing and changing and making new meaning almost as they go, right? Maybe not literally as they go, but like they're always able to shift and interact with the world around them, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if we view meaning as like a way that a culture understands and interacts with the world around it, then you can see why state society kind of needed rigid ideological conformity, because we interact with the world primarily in a one-way relationship, right? And we just go reproduce ourselves all over and take everything we need. But just like hunter-gatherers were in a very shifting web of interactions with all these different species, hundreds of different species in an environment, right? And then, the climate would shift, and or they'd have to migrate, so they had to always be able to reacquaint and refamiliarize themselves. Um, just like that, we're kind of going to have the same issue where being able to interact with a continually changing web of relations is going to be way more important than us all agreeing on the same, the one true truth. You get what I'm getting at? Am I
yeah,
making
yeah, yeah,
sense?
yeah.
Or If I'm not, please,
Do,
go
do
ahead.
you do you think that's where part of the anxiety with the threat of AI, like upending our culture and economy and everything, is coming
Mhm.
from? That we have lost confidence in our ability to reorient our sense of meaning? Is that
Interesting.
part of
I
the
would.
problem?
That's a good point. I think so because it's kind of threatening. Like, if you're used to getting meaning and truth from like an external source, and that external source is not really like a person or anything, even it's like coming from your phone, then yeah, like having something that could just make it up and show it to you, it's probably kind of anxiety inducing, right?
Yeah,
So, but there's this modern malady where we're basically kind of stuck in, it's like our brains are stuck in like fifth gear all the time, and we can't downshift anymore. And it's not because we're missing the right knowledge, it's because we're missing the right practices. It's like I was talking to you about with the Romans, for example, or the Egyptians. Like most societies were more ritual based, right?
yeah,
And versus us being very belief based. Um, there's just really just a handful of rituals that ancient peoples would kind of do the world over, obviously with their own specific variations, right?
yeah,
Um, but just reintroducing these is, you're like probably like more than 70% of the way towards a culture being able to create its own meaning and understand its own values
yeah,
again, right?
yeah.
So, gosh, what am I getting at here?
Hey,
So, and the point would be these rituals have actual neurological effects on the brain. It's not like,
I was about to say that because, like, well, I mean, let's just take endorphin as an example. That
mhm,
collective dancing or singing or chanting seems to have really deep evolutionary roots, and
mhm,
it triggers like group cohesion, and that's like a fundamental feeling that humans need. And
right.
one thing I recently found that can also trigger that is narrative. So, like when children are listening to fairy tales and stories being read to them, they get an endorphin rush from it. And I
Mhm.
wonder if our modern digital society is relying on narrative to kind of act as a substitute for these shared embodied forms of creating endorphin experiences to like bond
Okay,
community
interesting.
together because it's all we've got
Right.
left. We're watching like, YouTube shorts or binge watching a Netflix
Right.
series
They just
as,
keeping us like high all the time, so we kind
yeah,
of
well,
we
but it's like
feel
it's
more
the
stuff.
only form of endorphin that we have, but it's deeply
Mhm,
isolating.
mhm. Okay, so I would say, yeah, narrative and storytelling is kind of really at the heart of this. It's very interesting that our culture is so, like, okay, we think it's really dumb if somebody like tries to do CPR like they do in a movie, right? Or tries to like, I don't know, whatever, right? Wire their house up like they saw the movie electrician do. You know what I'm saying? But here's the thing, like that's dumb in the same way that deer pausing in headlights is dumb. And what I mean by that is that they've had a million years where this was a good idea, and it's very, very recently that it didn't work anymore. You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say deer pausing, but let's say deer running in the road, right?
yeah.
Um, the point that I'm trying to make here is that humans are basically wired to tell stories, right? And the way that we understand the world is primarily through storytelling based transfer of knowledge, right? So being able to tell rigorous facts in a story format in a way that's going to capture the essence of the important parts of that is is another example of a skill, being able to pass down that knowledge, because that's the way that we're actually wired to want to learn stuff. It's not reading out of a textbook. It's not having information beat into you over and over. it's it's more or less supposed to be fun, and if anything, you think about it on your own and you want to tell other people, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You get what I'm getting at there?
yeah.
So, but yeah, I was going to say, so these rituals produce actual changes in the brain, in terms of like your sense of self becoming more limited. And by your sense of self, I mean the default mode network, which is what makes you open up, and have a sense of like where your mind is basically simulating other people's, like you were saying, where you're feeling very open, very close, very connected to people like that, right? So ecstatic dance of some form or another, really doesn't matter which one it is. That's a big one. Like any culture or community would probably need to have some sort of like group communal dancing to really wind people together.
I'll
Um,
refer to Gangnam Style again, or maybe the
yeah,
Macarena as
the
a,
Macarena.
well, how stunted and diminished has the embodiment of that human tradition become in the modern
Right.
world? Like that's all we've got left
Hmm.
is a cheesy dance craze that's gone in
Oh
like a
yeah.
month.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna, well, I mean, I was gonna say honestly, I mean, you probably could like, but that's just it, right? It's like we don't need some perfect lost art. It's like honestly, you probably could take the Macarena. Like I often think that if you just had an island and put some kids on it, they do a better job making a new culture than we would with our stupid adult ideas, you know?
Did you know
Um,
there was a thought experiment? Someone actually wanted to do this in like the 1800s, like early industrialization.
mhm.
Linguists wanted to raise children completely in isolation. The
Wow,
theory
yeah.
was that they would speak the original human language of like Adam and Eve, or something along those lines. It was I don't know
Right.
what they were thinking, but yeah,
Yeah.
thank God they didn't actually do it to some poor children. But
It'd be interesting
um,
though, right?
and
I
but
think kids are, go ahead, sorry.
oh no, I was actually going to agree with you that kids have this. Well, I think they go through two phases. There's like a critical phase for learning the basics of language, that if they
Hmm.
don't acquire it from others, they'll miss out and it never really works. But I think in adolescence, there's an evolutionary period where humans are, they go through a period of cultural flexibility. And I think this comes from the tradition of, particularly of girls, often going to live with a different village in
Hmm.
their teenage, like marriageable years, and they would have to learn like at least a different dialect and a different set of, norms and traditions. And they would need to be culturally flexible to go through that change.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I think we definitely, yeah, we are very like, well, like I said, we're very fixed as a culture. And so, yeah, we really kind of shun the ability, like you're talking about, the younger people tend to have to be malleable and adapt and create new things, right?
Mm.
And it's funny that you'll, in any kind of environment where you get exclusively young people together, like even like kids at camp or something, they'll kind of start inventing like their own traditions
Yeah,
and their own little
yeah.
rituals and stuff like that. And it's like, again, I mean, I'm like, man, honestly, they might have a better shot at it than whatever I could think of and write down, then because theirs is going to spring from, from the spirit, for lack of a better word, right? It's going to
He-
come from the inside.
Here's a potentially controversial question. Do you
Oh,
think
sorry,
black...
before you ask,
Oh, no, quickly before I
go ahead.
forget. Do you think
Oh, go ahead.
black
Go ahead.
culture is better at that generative cultural creativity than European culture?
Hmm. Interesting. Gosh. Well, so I'm getting exposed to it secondhand, right? But
Yeah.
let me think. So generative cultural
Like
lexicon.
they come up with new language and art
Hmm.
forms, and I mean, even think back to jazz. Like that was
Right.
a reinterpretation and adaptation of instruments and musical traditions through
Right.
through
There's a
those
movie.
enslaved people.
Yeah, there's a movie that just came out recently that me and my wife really, really loved. It's called Sinners. Maybe you heard about it?
Mm.
No? Okay.
No, no,
It
no.
touches on, okay, it touches on a lot of these themes actually that you're talking about, where basically like the movie's about African Americans set in the Deep South during like I want to say the 1930s, and but yeah, it's actually really about like culture and music and creativity and insight and how like by being, I don't know if it's specifically by being oppressed or if it's simply because by not, by the dominant culture not trying to absorb them into its culture, it's kind of like, it's like, we don't really care if you do something with music as long as you work for us, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there hasn't been that like assimilation, that complete assimilation process of culture. So it's hard to say. I don't, it's probably not like genetics so much as it is like a thread or web of culture that's still intact where that involves insight and intuitive creative kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah,
where
yeah.
like, and there's also other examples too where like things that are just things that are, it's almost like well, it's like you said with learning a language, right? The brain is probably better at learning certain things early on, and so if that's part of your culture, then you pick that up better than an adult would trying to do it later on. So like for example with like dancing and rhythm and a
Hmm.
beat,
Yeah.
it's not just a joke to say white people don't have rhythm. We quite literally in our brains do not develop as well the part of the brain that listens to rhythm, right?
Well, we
Versus
have a
like,
culture that delights in laughing at children's amateur attempts at dancing.
right. Oh yeah, exactly. I was gonna say with my wife's family, they'll put the music on and everybody gets together and the kids get in there and they're like, yeah, yeah, you're dancing, you're doing it.
Yeah,
And it is funny. Like, I'm not going to say nobody laughs about it, like it's not serious, but you're not discouraging them. You're actively encouraging them to do it, right?
yeah,
So like
yeah,
my son has better rhythm than I do. I watched him and learned how to listen to a beat just by watching him, like, oh wow, what's he doing?
yeah,
Like, what is that? So yeah, it's like it's different aspects of culture that get encouraged or discouraged basically, right?
yeah,
And for
yeah.
us, I don't know, I mean, maybe like square dancing, like maybe they had a good amount of rhythm, I have no idea, but we've either haven't had it for a long time or haven't had it for a little time, but either way we certainly have lost a lot of these same. um, I was going to give another example with church. If you go to African American church like Southern Baptists versus if you go to like the kind of church I grew up in, the kind of church I grew up in, they might, well, like it depends on which. There's fucking 10,000 denominations of Christian in America, so there's quite a lot of different experiences you can have.
Mm,
But kind of church I grew up in is evangelical, so it's like there's a guy and he plays some music and a guitar and a plaid shirt, and then other than that, it's just like a guy reading to you out of the Bible. When you go to Black People's Church, it's like wildly different. Like it might as well be a different religion, honestly.
yeah, yeah,
People are like running up and down the aisles. People are fainting. People are like, it's to me, it's a lot of fun.
yeah,
Everybody gets really into the music. It's a blast. It's a great time. Um, and obviously, these are still both contained within Christianity. So obviously, there's kind of a dogmatic belief-based focus. But I have observed, and I've read about this as well, that a lot of the traditional African religious practices, which, um, again, just to emphasize, it's not the beliefs that the Africans had that are special, it's the practices, right? A
yeah,
lot of the practices are more or less still being used, right? Like there's a lot of that, because essentially what we're talking about, which I didn't really get into the shamanic trance part, but essentially what we're talking about is accessing the intuitive, more subconscious parts of the brain that the modern mind is totally like walled off from.
yeah.
And if you look at like Dr. Ian McGilchrist, when he talks about what's I
Oh,
can't
the
remember right
master
now.
and the emissary, the left
Right.
and right side of the brain, and dominance and
Yes, yes, yes.
integration. Yeah,
Yep. His book, Dr. John Vervaeke, he talks about like Neoplatonism, but he's really also talking about a lot of this neurological stuff that they're just realizing. It's just basically access to that intuitive part of the brain, access to the part of the brain that thinks in patterns instead of in like linear thought, that thinks in in cycles and is able to connect dots that otherwise we wouldn't really have access to. Like our part, the brain that we use in the modern world it's good for like legalistic thinking, like in a courtroom, and it's good for like putting like your radiator together or something, but it's
yeah,
not really good for like actually interacting with the living, breathing world around us. Like
yeah,
if you
yeah.
think about ecology, right, which really only just got off as a field like a few decades ago, think about, like you've pointed out, all of the all of the industry and all of the literal fuel and all of the data that has to go into us having an understanding of what an ecosystem is, right? Versus like ancient pagan people who were like, yeah, that forest is where the spirits live and we
Uh-huh.
don't cut it down for that reason.
Yeah,
It's not arbitrary. They had actual like modern ecology will tell you that they have actual, like, those are reservoirs for biodiversity, and they'll say that their ancient land management practices conserve topsoil, whatever. Like we can factually validate that what they were doing did work. But again, it takes so much industrial resources so that we can see it the
to
right
to
way. But
justify
like,
it. Yeah,
yeah, versus just
just doing it.
um,
Just
yeah, just doing it,
well,
right?
feeling it, feeling it.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
reminds me of when I was doing field work, collecting a particular kind of plant all over Australia. And originally, I was going off database locations from a herbarium, like I had a particular place to go to look for them. But after a while, I got to the point I could be driving 100 k's an hour down the highway, look out the window at a hill, and I'd be like, "Yeah, they're growing up there."
right.
And I wouldn't know, I couldn't explain why, I couldn't explain how I knew, but I was almost always correct if I actually stopped the car and went out and had a look. And I'm like, yep, I
Exactly,
I
right.
understand this organism enough and the ecosystem enough on an intuitive level to do something reliably enough for it to be a useful skill.
Right. Yeah. You understand it like on a deep subconscious level, whatever word you want to use for that. If you say, again, like in the Western world, we have a tendency like we kind of write off this stuff as like woo and hocus pocus. And it kind of is in the sense of there's not um, we have a tendency to create theories for why things work. We'd have to justify it with a theory, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which again, the you wouldn't have to do that if you weren't so belief focused, right? Like I don't need to be like, oh yeah, the chakra energy aligned between you and it doesn't matter. Like the point is you understood it, right? So, but yeah, the point is whatever word you want to use for that, intuitive knack, spirit, whatever you want to call it, subconscious, you are deep parts of your brain that you would not be able to actually write down or convey to someone else, which is basically all we know. That's all. Most of our knowledge is just based on conveyable information. It's not based on subtle intuitive information. Those are what you're accessing, right? I think you even
yeah.
told me that you had like people in the lab who were like they could just slap some stuff together and make the right uh, combination of chemicals or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus,
A lot of biochemistry in the lab comes down to, well, we call it black magic, or like magic hands. Some
yeah,
people just had a feel for what they were doing, and you can follow the recipe as precisely as you like, and you can even use the exact same ingredients that they were using. But yeah, just some people, something about what they
yeah,
were doing was not. And this gets me to the point. It's about reproducibility, scalability, and control
mhm,
that modern industrial systems will often favor something that's an inferior product, provided it can be mass produced on command.
right, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's yeah, exactly like that. That we are those mass-produced people essentially, right?
Yeah.
We can't actually like go out and really engage and interact and continually rebalance ourselves with like a living, breathing world. And that's why I think it's an important skill essentially to learn. That's a really good example because it's like you're talking about industrial chemistry. Like that is the most refined I can think level of should be reproducible every
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right?
And it's not. And
Um,
it's not.
yeah, and so yeah. At any rate, I just want to
It's
round
funny.
that off by
One quick thing. It's funny the way that high technology in the form of AI is going, because one of the quirks of it is that it's non-replicable. That you can
Mhm.
take the same model and think that you're interacting with it the same way, and it'll give you wildly different results. In some ways, that's the definition of intelligence.
Right.
That it isn't just a linear, A does B does C kind of machine. If you want
Yeah,
it to be
interesting.
able to handle more complicated situations, you're going to get more complicated behavior.
I think I read something about like how uh, they had this like program that could like create its own circuits or something like that,
Mm.
and they would have random parts of it that wouldn't connect to anything and it wouldn't make any sense to them, but they would take them out and it wouldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And they thought that there was some sort of electromagnetic field uh, thing going on where like it was transmitting data through an EMF field. It's kind
Which
of
is
amazing just on
completely
its own.
outside of the theory of circuit design.
Yeah, and we don't even like that's something modern science has not scratched at all. Like the
Mm.
brain produces an EMF field, right?
Yep.
And
And biophotons and a whole bunch of other weird things are going on.
right,
Like
yeah, amazing.
there's so much
Like
going on in our poor little heads.
MRI techs, they'll lose, memory and stuff like that if they have to go into the room. Like it obviously does interact with things in the real world, but we've filled our environment with them and we have zero clue what it does. Like that's, a more sane society 100 or let's say 50 years ago would have been like, oh, look, the brain makes EMF fields. Let's study the hell out of that. And, we'd be moving stuff with our mind by now. Like we would have figured out how to harness that. You know what I'm saying? Instead of having no clue whatsoever. So I was going to say, I wonder if that's going to be how AI really gets. I wonder if that's how the reins of power are going to get away from the elites, is that they're going to have these AIs that work. And it's like, yeah, just plug in the homunculus to your run the country device, and but they don't really know how it works, right? And so we get to the point where we can't really maintain them or reproduce them anymore, and it's just running a momentum alone.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting to consider, right? Like that it's almost like I don't know, geez, it's almost like some like ancient like god that we just don't. yeah, or it could get to the point where it's like just this ancient god, like they don't know how they made it or what what does it. It's falling apart, but that's interesting to consider.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That
just to
that.
round off
Oh yes,
what I
yeah,
was
yeah.
saying about beliefs and all that. I didn't get into the shamanic trance stuff. That stuff's really interesting. I guess if anybody wants to, it's also kind of dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So if anybody wants to message me on Reddit, I could always talk about that. But I was just going to say, just as something everybody can do, just as a really useful practice, is mindfulness meditation.
Mm.
I know that gets pushed a lot nowadays as just like mindfulness, like this will make you better at your corporate soulless job. But I just mean that in terms of you can pretty much, if you do body awareness or if you do mindfulness, like the breathing meditation, you can experientially very quickly see that all of the ideas and beliefs and this idea of outside truth and really just most of the doom loop that people can get into, whatever you want to call it, right? All the stuff that basically isn't actually happening to your body, like you can pretty quickly see, oh, this is just an idea in my head. Like it bothers me as much as I want to. Do you get what I'm saying there? Like,
Has anyone tried doing mindfulness meditation whilst watching AI slop on YouTube Shorts?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe it
I
would.
think I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah, see if it still works. Might it might like weaken your sense of self too much. The AI is gonna like take over you. It's like we've been waiting for somebody to give us access. But my point is just like that that there's a kind of embodied sort of cognition that I think is more the default for people,
Yeah,
like using your first person experience to engage with the world. And then we have these ideas and beliefs, and a lot of them aren't really positive. They're kind of anxious and unpleasant, but we don't really know
by
how to.
design because it makes us good citizens.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't know how to deal with them. And so mindfulness is just a really useful practice to quite literally have a distance from your thoughts and not take them so seriously, right?
Yeah,
It's not like that
yeah,
you don't need to have thoughts at all. It's just that you realize, oh, they're not that big of a deal. Like
yeah,
a
yeah. Give
thought and a belief becomes a useful tool instead of something that you like cling to, right?
it's perspective.
Yeah, right. You're able to be like, okay, does this work better as opposed to, um, does this like validate my identity or or something like that, right?
Now
But yeah,
we're getting pretty close to 2 hours. This has been a wonderful
sure.
chat, and it's been a really cohesive focus on, I guess you'd say, personal preparation
Hmm.
for, the challenges of the century ahead. And we wanted to talk about so much more. I think I want to get you back a second time that we can talk
Hmm.
about more grounded things about your particular quest for land. Like you want to end up to be
Oh, geez,
farming
yeah.
on land
Sorry,
one
we
day.
forgot about that.
No, 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 no. I think it's a really uh, nice segmented break point to separate the discussion into two
Hmm.
parts. So yeah, I think we should come back and have another chat on those kind of more
Sure.
nitty-gritty issues in the future, because I know you've been thinking about it a lot. I
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
just lucked
absolutely.
into my path here.
Yeah.
If I'd had to do it in a more deliberate way. I guess I'm in a position to kind of look back and think about that from the perspective of someone who's been settled for 10 or 15 years in one chunk of
Right.
land. Because yeah, I have days where I'm like, would I have chosen this place if it was completely up
Yeah.
to me?
Well, actually, so if you don't have time, we could just save this. But I did have some questions for you, and one of them pretty much was kind of exactly what you just touched on. Do you have
Yeah,
time for
no,
me
I
to
think
ask
I
you any
think we have
questions?
to even in the next few
Okay, no
days.
worries, no
We'll do
worries.
this
I
soon.
understand, I understand.
Yeah, yeah, we'll do this
All
soon.
right.
But no, this has been really wonderful. Oh, do you want to just quickly mention any places people can follow up with you? You don't have much of a, like, you're
Yeah,
not
I don't
selling a
really do
book or a
anything.
course or anything. You mentioned Reddit as
Yeah.
somewhere that people can find
I mean,
you.
if they just want to give me money without anything in return, I wouldn't complain. No, yeah, I'm just on Reddit as you Cimbri, Cimbri,
Uh-huh.
and I guess I'm on Substack with the same name, but I don't really write anything. So yeah, just I don't know. I mean, if anybody wants to talk about this stuff, it's interesting to me.
Brilliant.
Um, but yeah, Shane, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This has been such a fascinating chat. And yeah, I'll get you back soon for round two, and we'll talk about all of the thoughts and considerations when somebody is looking at getting out of the cities and suburbs and having a go at what would you call it? Peri-apocalyptic farming life.
Right. Yeah, I always say like post-industrial, like either post-doom, uh, like post-doom parenting or post-industrial permaculture. Like I always have to caveat it like that, you know?
Yeah, I like your branding better. You've been thinking about it more than me.
But yeah,
Okay,
well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I'll look
thank you.
forward to the next time.
Brilliant. Thank you. The Zero Input Agriculture podcast is a solo passion project built with my ample time and meagre resources. If you would like to support the show, then sign up for a paid subscription to my Zero Input Agriculture blog at Substack. As a reward, you can read all my past posts and listen to the audiobook of Taming the Apocalypse. If you prefer reading about the past and future of biological technology, you can read the ebook of Taming the Apocalypse through Amazon. And finally, please rate and review the show on whatever podcast app you use, since it helps other people find me. Or recommend the show directly to anyone who could use some inspiration to become a plant breeder themselves.